we went in there and I'll just say it, we paid ourselves 50,000 a year, and it was enough to keep the lights on. And that's all of us wanted. It was like, let's give it a go. We're not in it for the paycheck at this point. We're in it for the sweat equity. And so we just made it work. And I was up in the field again in 2016. I remember it was the first day I got to the field, and Zach called me. He's like, "Man, we got the money. We're doing it." And it's like, "Whoa, cool." And so we all had about 2 months to just tie everything up. And so yeah, we got back in September, and I just went to Zach's house, and we started working in his kitchen, and we did that for, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months, or something like that.
I've always wondered how these various young but clearly very successful junior exploration MDs decided to take the plunge and get into the risky game of exploration. Often they're geologists, no MBAs, no accounting, legal or general business background. So what drives them and what's been their pathway to get to where they are now? How hard was it? What sacrifices did they have to make? What lessons were learned? In this episode, I sit down with Francis MacDonald and ask him exactly that. Francis is president of Kenorland Minerals, a company that he co-founded in 2016. He's also recently taken on a role as the CEO of the company Lift, which is focused on discovering and developing hard rock lithium deposits in Canada. Now, we're not here to spruik or plug his projects. Plenty of other channels around that do that better. Instead, I'm interested to talk with him about his training, his education and his background, and his decision-making process, the people around him, and how to build a successful team, and whether investors care about MDs that don't have decades of experience. So I hope that this chat inspired some other people out there who are interested in following the same trajectory, but who are not quite sure about the risks and rewards. I found it really quite motivating to listen to Francis' story, and I hope you do too. Hi Francis, how's things?
Doing pretty good. I was just telling you about the dreary overcast day we've got here in Vancouver. Other than that, life is fine.
I was talking to another friend in Vancouver just this morning, and just not the weather, but also Vancouver seems to be not the, wasn't it the top city for living or something for years, and it's losing its spot or something. It's, don't know who's number one now, but I always wanted to live there. This is a while back now, but it's not a bad place to be. Obviously not as cool as Dunedin. Not sure if you've ever made it this far down south, but...
No, I've never made it down there. And actually, I don't live here anymore. I lived in Vancouver for on and off for 15 years, but I'm based in Munich, Germany. These days, really? I'm just in town for a few days.
Yeah. So why, sorry, just to start there, why Munich? Is that work related or?
When it doesn't make sense, there's always a woman involved.
Yeah, I had a sneaking suspicion, and that's incidentally how I ended up here in Dunedin, because people ask me about why am I in Dunedin. I can
exactly.
blame somebody else. Oh, that's pretty cool. So, so that's interesting. How do you make that? So lots of flights, I guess, then to try and get across, or do you still do that a lot, or?
Oh yeah, it's busy right now, and because I've recently changed jobs and companies. So I was with Kenorland Minerals, a company that I co-founded before this, and I was doing a lot of business development, project generation, putting deals together, that kind of thing, and overseeing exploration. But we had a lot of exploration people on the ground. And now I've taken on this new role as CEO of Lift, this lithium company. And so we're just really getting this company up and running. So there's a lot of things that you need to be there. And one of them that we're dealing with right now is permitting and Indigenous engagement. So I'm kind of on their schedule, and they're quite busy. And so it's really just, be here in Yellowknife at the state. Like, okay.
Look, I don't envy that side of things. I mean, the traveling is used to be romantic, but that's a long time ago. It's but before we jump too far ahead, because I saw that you jumped in this new venture Lift, and I was going to ask you a few things about it, but just for the listener's sake, because I'll just give you a bit of background, because we've never met before, right? And this is literally the first time we're talking, and I wanted to have a chat to you because one of the topics that some of our listeners had recommended is talking to some to some entrepreneurially minded folk who are, the early part of their career start these exploration companies, and what drives them to get to that point, and how do they get a good group of people around them to make it a success, and what's the special sauce? I mean, there's a lot of young people listening into the show, and I'd be really interested to hear what you did to do all this stuff. Is it literally you woke up and said, oh, I'll start this company? How did you get there? And because I think you're not a geologist, if I get that right, you're an engineer. And I did have a sneak peek at your LinkedIn profile the other day, and I saw even there's something music. How can you study engineering and music at the same university, or did I just not get that right? Sorry, a few different angles there.
That was right. And my degree is in geological engineering, but really I took a lot of geology courses, and maybe that's a good place to start, is just the education part of it. So I started in general engineering because I thought I wanted to do aerospace engineering because, hey, cool. Spaceships are cool.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I went to a small university in my hometown in Antigonish, Nova Scotia in Canada. Yep. And so the engineering department is small. With 5,000 students, you can't support full streams of engineering. So there's 2 years of general engineering there, and everybody fed into a larger engineering school.
Right.
And so after the first year, we had to go on these tours at Dalhousie University in Halifax, which was the bigger school, of the different engineering departments. And I was excited to go on the mechanical engineering tour because that's what you needed to do aerospace. And so, we all lined up, and then they took us down into a basement for the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning lab. And they're like, yeah, this is what we do in mechanical engineering. And it's like, oh, this isn't a spaceship. That's not very interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then I went on the mining engineering tour, and it was like, oh, these guys are working outside. They're traveling around, blowing stuff up. This sounds pretty cool. And I started playing piano when I was 3 years old, and played guitar since I was 12 years old. And so music was always a big part of my earlier life. And it was always really a question of, what do I want to do with my life? I was always into sciences, but also really into music. And it got to a point where I thought, oh, maybe I should explore this music path a little more. And so I switched into a jazz program at the same university. And after about, 8 months of that, I said, not sure I want to be a musician for a career. Am I going to get stuck playing in a country band to pay rent on a Wednesday night? And I got interested in water resources. So just how is water going to affect politics, and water is one of the essential things for life. Could become a big issue down the road. And so I was really interested in that, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll go to geological engineering. I can do hydrogeology. And so I took those courses and thought, oh, this is really boring. Don't think I want to do this. Sorry to any hydrogeologists that are listening. And I completely subscribe to that, because I'm Dutch, and they are quite well into the hydrogeology, and I found it the most boring and unentertaining stuff ever. So I agree with you there. Yeah. So I went to the AIM-BC Roundup conference because one of our professors canceled classes. She said, you had to go to this conference, and that's what you need to do for school this week. And that was 2007, and it was a good time to be in the gold business at that point. And so lots of money was flowing in, and I got a job offer for a gold exploration project or job up at the Hope Bay project in Nunavut. And so I went up there in the summer and just fell in love with exploration. And that's kind of how I got into it. And I just took more and more geology classes. My degree is in geological engineering, but my thesis was in volcanology, and I just did geology at the end of it, basically.
Yeah, wow, that's a cool trajectory, because it's funny, because everybody that I've spoken to about how did they roll into it, lots of people that there's lots of people. Some people that wanted to be a geologist their whole lives. And some people who suddenly indeed, got introduced to this exploration game, because, we're all Indiana Jones basically, running around there, helicopters and looking for stuff, and the adventure around that is pretty hard to beat. And I think, the only other thing that I ever wanted to do if it wasn't geology was indeed, it's something to do with space. I'm not sure if it was building aircraft, but I realized quite quickly that you needed to be a little bit more than normal with maths, and that's generally speaking not the geologist's strength. So sort of got out of that quickly enough. But yeah, that's a cool trajectory, man. And then obviously one thing led to another. But maybe then take us to the point where, you're obviously then getting some experience, working for people, you got mentors, but how do you get to the point to say, hey, look, I can do this, and I can maybe even do this better. I'm going to pick up you don't just walk into a bit of, land somewhere. You need to find some good people around you, and that doesn't usually happen in a few years, right? So how did that go?
Sure. That's another progression, obviously. And so when I finished university, I was thinking about doing a master's in volcanology. I was still working in gold exploration, but I was quite into the scientific aspect of it. And my undergrad thesis was on how kimberlite magmas propagate through the crust. And so I was, got into it. You learn about something, you want to learn about it more. And at that point, I didn't do the master's. I stayed on working. It ended up going into Newmont, this project. So I came into Newmont that way. And during those years, I was really focused on the science. And I was doing regional mapping whenever there was no snow on the ground. And so I was quite into that, of just putting the geology story together from a regional perspective. And I would say not as focused on the exploration part of it, because I think of this I think there's two types of geoscientists, like let's call them geologists, that are really focused on the science. And then there's explorationists that are focused on finding things. And I was really heavily in the geology camp of really just focusing on the core geological science at that point.
Right.
And it was great. I was able to do that within the team that I was working with, which were a lot of great people at that point. And so that ended, and I went to West Africa with Newmont to do regional exploration there as well. And that's kind of where things started to turn. It was like, okay, it's not just about the geology. We got to find stuff.
Yeah.
And
mineralization is not ore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that was great. And then when it really kind of hit home was I went to Ethiopia with Newmont as well. And we had we did a big BLEG survey, so bulk leach extractable gold stream sediments, over about 30,000 square kilometers of ground in the Tigray region, which is northern Ethiopia. And when I got there, I was just kind of given 7,000 square kilometers of ground and a stream sediment survey, and basically sent to go look for stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when you actually find stuff, then it gets really exciting. And so I was just out there chasing stream anomalies. I had a hammer in one hand and XRF in the other hand, and just zapping boulders upstream, just chasing boulders upstream for a couple days, and then getting to like an outcropping gossan, 30 meters wide, hundreds of meters long, ends up assaying 100 grams per ton gold. And it's just like,
never been found before. You're first person there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there had been some artisanal people mining it, but it was never in any mineral occurrence databases, never reported anywhere by any exploration companies. So, I think it was at that point, it was like, wow, okay, you can actually find something as an explorer, and it's like, okay, maybe I could do this for myself too.
Yeah, so that's when the light sort of came on, that when you went from an explorer to an entrepreneur more, I guess, because it's quite a big jump.
Yeah, it is for sure. I think, that's the light went on in my head, but I talked to one of my old bosses at Hope Bay when I was in the scientific mindset, and he was like, oh yeah, I always knew you were going to do this, because I guess at one point I came up and I was like, there's some really good stuff that I think goes off the claims that Newmont owns. Can I stake them? And he's like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, but that's why we do what we do, and to do it yourself. I mean, so yeah. Besides being a geologist and having mapped on the other side of that border, and I mean, I came in a wee bit later as a consultant, but fairly untouched ground and literally walking into stuff that nobody's ever walked before. That's what we. That's the fun thing. But obviously, when you get into picking up land, particularly in tricky jurisdictions, I mean, security, a tenure, doing well by local people, and it's the actual geology part disappears pretty quickly, and it's more about all the other stuff, and
Sure.
that's not for everybody as well. So how did you? So when did you? So coming out of that and thinking, oh, okay, I can do that. What's then the transition? What's been the thought process? Did you just end up having a good bunch of time to look at a map, in front of you and say, there's some opportunities here, and you start zoning in an area where you already had some context or some thoughts or ideas, or did it come out of just hanging out with the right crowd? How did you go from there?
I think so. How the Ethiopia thing ended was there was some things happening, and it was like, okay, we're going to shut down for a couple weeks while we kind of work out some issues. And that couple weeks turned into, I can't remember how long, like a year or
Right.
more. And so having that time was the essential part. And I think about this quite a bit. It's super important to take a break from something and reset and allow new ideas to formulate.
Yeah.
And that was the important time. I think we left Ethiopia in May or June of 2015, and then I just went back to Canada. Was just hanging out,
Yeah.
and it was great. But that was the time when I started thinking about, oh, okay, maybe this is something. Put some ideas together, get some people together. And so it was December of 2015. I went to my friend Scott Smith's house, who is a co-founder of Kenorland as well. Scott was also putting ideas together, and he was one of the smartest people I'd worked with at Hope Bay. And we worked well together, and I was like, okay, maybe we should do something together. You're doing this, I'm doing the same thing. And I said, okay, I'll go talk to Zach Flood, who we had both worked with in 2007 at Hope Bay. And because Zach's dad was in the business, and like he had this network that I didn't know anybody that had that kind of network. And he's also a great geologist, super smart, and he was working on the business side of it. So it was a few months later when Zach actually called me up. He's like, hey, I have a guy that has an emerald property in Zambia. Do you want to split a finder's fee on it?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go out and have a beer and chat about it. And so we're talking about this emerald thing. And I was like, okay, cool. But like, man, we should put some ideas together for gold. And he was kind of not happy with his job at the time. And he was like, okay, let's start talking about it.
Yeah.
And so, over a month, we kind of went back and forth. And then it was like, all right, let's actually do this. And so one of his best friends was working with a guy at Haywood Securities in Vancouver, John Tognetti, who's the chairman of Haywood Securities. And so it's also Zach's dad had a long relationship with John. And so John was like, yep, let's have them in, pitch some ideas. And Zach went in, pitched our ideas, and John was like, yep, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so that was it. We got Kenorland started.
And how much did you start on? How much did you get together for that initial raise?
For the funding?
Yeah.
We raised $500,000, and I think the founders put in 150,000, so like 350,000 is probably what we. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty slow. That's you don't keep going for very long on that. So you just how did you?
We went in there and I'll just say it. We paid ourselves 50,000 a year. And it was enough to keep the lights on, and that's all of us wanted. It was like, let's give it a go. We're not in it for the paycheck at this point. We're in it for the sweat equity. And so we just made it work. And I was up in the field again in 2016. I remember it was the first day I got to the field, and Zach called me. He's like, man, we got the money. We're doing it. And I was like, whoa, cool.
Yeah.
And so we all had about 2 months to just tie everything up. And so, yeah, we got back in September, and I just went to Zach's house and we started working in his kitchen. and we did that for, I don't know, 4 months, 5 months or something like that.
And did you do some of your own exploration with that, or did you go straight to repackaging, right? Because your model is obviously, this incubation model, or that with Kenorland, that incubation model. Did you go straight to repackaging, or did you actually do sampling? I mean, obviously not a lot of drilling with 500,000, but what's the sort of work that you did to?
So we started the company in September. We got beat out staking a couple things in October, and then November we staked the first land package in the Abitibi Greenstone Belt in Quebec.
Right.
It cost $50,000 to stake. It was 500 square kilometer land package, 70 kilometers of strike of this big deformation zone. And, we were like, high-fiving each other. And then it was like, oh, wait, what do we do now? We've got like 1.2 million in work commitments.
Yeah, and then you have to drop 50% after a year, and you haven't done what you need to do to actually work out what you want to drop and so on.
Yeah, exactly. But so that was October of 2016, and then by January of 2017, we had 4 offers on the table.
Yeah.
2 from majors, 2 from juniors, and so I think that was really, that was the proof of concept.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we can stake ground, we can do a deal.
Yeah.
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 And so after that, we got a deal done on that ground. And so on the back of that, the first financing was at 10 cents, and then we did another financing at 25 cents after that. And then we staked 2 more properties immediately after that.
Yeah.
And, we just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, look, I had a little look at the website and listened to one of Zach's presentations, and it sounds like a great story. And I mean, you can obviously say 2016, 17 is probably good timing as well, obviously, with the industry. For us, it was 2016 when suddenly there were some seedlings again of the industry showing some life. And that always helps, but sounds like a good business model. And so nice to hear that you've done well out of that. It's a good success story, That's
yeah. Well, I mean, it was something that was very holistically grown. We started from very little capital, and from that, Kenorland's leveraged that to put about $70 million in the ground.
Yeah. Wow.
Over the last 6 years, and that number keeps growing every year. And Kenorland's become a sustainable business with cash flow.
Yeah, I heard that. That's quite a model, obviously, because that's not your usual throw money out the door exploration company. Can you just talk about that? Because I heard Zach talk about that, but can you explain it a bit further?
Sure. Well, so the business model for Kenorland is stake ground and then convince other people to spend their money doing the exploration. And Kenorland will keep either minority interest at the end of the day or a royalty. And Kenorland also operates the projects for partners. One of the big things is that major mining companies have stripped out a lot of their exploration teams. And so this is a gap that Kenorland can fill. It's a plug and play. Here's a team. Here's the project. Just give us money and, go out and do it. So that's really kind of struck a chord, I would say, with one of the biggest target markets, which is the major mining companies, because it's easy for them to just get on the ground quickly. And so out of that, Kenorland would clip a management fee, which was ranging between 10 or 15% of the exploration budgets. So when you're spending, call it $20 to $30 million in a year, you're clipping $2 to $3 million in management fees. Yeah. So that's part of it. And then the other deals that were done were putting projects into junior companies, and you would get stock payments for those. Or some of the deals, like as we went, we were getting better and better deals each time. And so they would bring in cash payments yearly. So eventually, you get all of these deals running. There's 50,000 coming from this deal, 150 coming from that one, and
cash flow and
then exactly. And then one of the bigger let's call it sources of revenue so far for Kenorland was Lyft, which is the company now that I went down to Lyft to run that one. And so Lyft was generated in Kenorland. We had some ideas about lithium pegmatites in the James Bay region in Quebec. One of Kenorland's shareholders was very interested in lithium, and I was talking to him about it. He said, "Oh, stake it, we'll put it into a new company." And so Kenorland got a 10% equity stake in Lyft on listing, which is 1.75 million shares. And so Lyft has done a bunch of other stuff. Lyft has recently acquired this portfolio of lithium pegmatites in Northwest Territories. But it's really, which looks like it could be one of the more significant hard rock lithium deposits in North America. So Kenorland ended up with 1.75 million shares. Lyft has been trading up to $17 a share. So, that was a huge win for Kenorland.
So no more work in a basement, I guess, then.
Yeah, well, right now Kenorland's sitting on 20 million in cash, over 10 million in stock. And so, it's sitting pretty right now.
Yeah, no, look, that's great. And I was going to ask about Lyft because that lithium, look, what do I know about it? I'm not particularly into the lithium space, particularly not from the commercial side, but there are a few other companies there actively. Is E3, do you know E3 as well? Are you guys sort of following what others are doing there? And do you see the lithium thing being sustainable? I mean, it's a bit of a broad question that everybody asks at the moment, so a bit of a bullshit question, but really fundamentally, is that how many projects there, and is that sustainable for a Lyft, or is there a bigger game there?
So I'm not a lithium market expert. I'm now talking to a lot of lithium experts, and so I can really just relay what I'm hearing from my contacts. So in terms of the overall market, people see this as being a bit more of a sustainable market and not like a big price spike and fall like we saw in the last market. So the supply demand dynamics don't look like they're going to get worked out. There doesn't look like there's really any significant supply coming online or foreseeable supply that's going to fill that gap. And a lot of people are using prices like we see right now in their financial models going out towards 2030. So unless there's some big change in technology and, we really see DLE coming online in a big way, then there doesn't look like there's going to be any let up for the supply demand dynamics.
Yeah, it's still a very good place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, calling a macro market like that is difficult, and it's not my game to call that. I just saw the Yellowknife project as, having potential to be one of the top 10 hard rock lithium resources in the world.
Yeah.
When you get into a top 10 ranking of any mineral deposit, that means something. Yeah. Opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. No, look, it's. We've got green bushes here in WA. I've had the pleasure of looking at that, and that's. It's good to see what you're looking for if you're out in the field. That you actually see what these things should look like, and that's a pretty nice thing to have on your list. But in terms of other points of differences, is that the main sort of thing that you put on slide 2 of the PowerPoint deck? Is that is that it's that potential, or what about metallurgy and some of the mining economics? Is that what any other points of difference you want to lift out there? Sorry for the pun.
Yeah, no, sure. So there is historic metallurgy that was done in the 1980s, and it was positive. There was bulk samples, 230 kilogram samples. They were able to make a spodumene concentrate that was between 5 and 6%. So that's pretty good with an overall recovery of 80%. There's low iron content in the spodumene concentrate. So from a preliminary standpoint, the metallurgy looks good. Looking at these things just from a mineralogical basis, it also looks pretty simple. Like, these aren't zoned pegmatites that have a lot of they haven't been cooking there, and you don't have a lot of strange minerals in them. It's really quartz, feldspar, spodumene, and a bit of mica.
No,
So
lepidolite or
no,
pedolite.
there's no lepidolite, and even like accessory minerals, there's not really that much.
Yeah.
So they're relatively simple. The crystal sizes are big, and one of our advisors, Don Haynes, he's looked at a lot of spodumene projects around the world, and he thinks that this will be amenable to a two-stage DMS process.
Yep.
So that will be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
But I think right now, in the lithium market, like the grade honestly isn't the biggest factor right now, just with the prices where they are. It's really the time to get to market, and also probably the size of the deposit. And then also, obviously infrastructure, proximity to rail,
All those
proximity
things.
to
Yeah.
roads, power, all of that. So
Yeah.
that's one of the other things that the Yellowknife project has going for it, is the proximity to rail. It's probably
Yeah.
one of the better placed spodumene projects in North America, or
Yeah.
at least in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing, because with these spodumene projects, you're making a concentrate that's, call it between 5 and 6% lithia, and your grades are running between 1 to 1.5% lithia. So it's taking you, let's call it 5 to 8 tons of ore to make a ton of concentrate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have a 100 million ton deposit, you're going to be shipping between 10 and 20 million tons of material. Like it's not like a copper con
No.
where your mass reduction is a lot larger. It's not like gold where you can fly it out on an airplane.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like, you're shipping a lot of material still.
Yeah. You need to be close to something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so that, and so you only just started into that. How are you guys? I mean, maybe just a different angle to making that a success. I mean, you talked about some of the people you got in the team, and you just talked about Kenorland, of having a team able to apply to something. And I know that sounds really easy, and sort of having built a team as well myself, not easy. It sounds very easy, but access to talent, competitiveness with the majors, you'll have all the same issues to deal with. Where do you guys try to put the balance in terms of attracting this team, or is your market a little bit kinder than it is here? Because here, finding geologists is going to be pretty damn hard in the next 5 years, or ones with a bit of experience.
Yeah, I think so. With Lift, we're going to take a bit of a different strategy than Kenorland, and we're going to kind of segment this out. We're going to engage a service provider that I've known for quite a while, who has a good reputation for operating big drill programs, and we'll have our own internal technical team as well, which are people that I've worked with in the past or have known. And so we're going to try and keep it nimble, and really kind of outsource a lot where we can. And that's a strategy that can work, and it can be a failure. And in Orland, we tried to do that and didn't have so much success with it. But at this point, the plan with Yellowknife is to go out and do a substantial drill program, which is on the order of, say, 50,000 meters of drilling. So to build that team up, to come out with a big drill program like that is really difficult. So in the beginning, we're going to outsource what we can to get up and running.
Well, I sit on the other side of that equation, as you might know. So I usually am the one putting the proposal and the program together to do this campaign style stuff. And there's pros and cons to all of it. Obviously, you'll end up paying more, but hopefully you'll have an out of the box solution. And then there's obviously all the knowledge that goes along with that team once it disappears, which is a little bit overrated. I find if I have to listen to that counter argument, but it's certainly part of the mix.
Sure. And so one of the ethos, or one of the mantras in this company, is that time is more valuable than money right now in the lithium space.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's basically like, let's just do everything we can as quickly as possible. And so to build a team to do that would be prohibitive, I would say.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the space that we're in and the speed that we need to do this with just kind of forces us to outsource.
Yeah, look, I mean, and without, hanging on that too long, because that triggers a couple of natural responses with me, obviously, because, faster is difficult, especially when the industry is at tilt. It's always yesterday, and quality is something you want to maintain. Bringing in a contractor on site, those guys are not sitting there in the basement on dry bread and water waiting for somebody to push a button. They need to be pulled from somewhere else. No, they're not sitting there waiting for your job. And for all those people to come to site, as much as it's a contracting solution, we all still struggle with the same issues of getting something going somewhere. And I'm not sure how many rigs you're planning on churning there, but it's always challenging. But nothing that nobody already knows, obviously. But well, that's challenging, and that's why we do what we do, I guess. But so, what's the next milestone? What should we look out for? I mean, how long is that going to take? What do you think?
The next milestone is getting the drill permits, and so hopefully it's imminent. We're doing some more engagement with First Nations right now. So we have a meeting with Chiefs and Council next week just to introduce the project. We've been talking with their lands and regulatory office before. So, but the Chiefs and Council will need to be involved in this because the scale of what we're doing isn't necessarily, we're not going out with one rig and drilling 3,000 meters. We're talking about going with, 5 to 7 rigs and drilling 50,000 meters. So it's a bit bigger. Yeah. And so that's really the next milestone. Once we get the permit sorted, then that's going to just kick off a whole chain reaction of things to go out and get this program started.
Yeah. Oh, exciting, man. It's now look, I'm jealous. It's nice to be, building stuff and moving the industry along, and I always got a lot of respect for people who are out there doing it, right? I mean, people talking about deposits drying up and us not finding enough, and it's, folks like yourself who are obviously taking all the risks and trying to put it together to feed that hungry monster that's called the world. So it's somebody's got to do it, and so all respect to you, and hopefully you can make it work. What's after all that sort of live stuff and maybe a bit of commercial stuff, what's keeping you up at night? If you do you just let the global economy be what it is and do your thing, or do you what discussions do you have with your board? I mean, skills shortage, can't do anything about it anyway. What's sort of on your top 3 list from a risk perspective, or opportunity for that matter?
I mean, what keeps me up, it's really just getting this drill program up and running right now. It's I think it's important. Let's say from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it's important to focus on the important things 120%, because I don't find you get places by doing all this stuff at once. It's focusing on the immediate task at hand. And then it's just, you're stacking blocks on one another, And so as you stack a block on the next one, then, there's something else that'll keep me up at night.
Yeah. Well, that's not a way to live your life as well, but the never give up image comes to mind. But there's obviously a bit of drive that you need to have. I mean, you'll deal with a few disappointments, but keep moving forward and stacking those blocks up. So and any parting wisdoms for the folks who looking to work out where to go with their career? What I mean, you said, I think, paraphrasing, it was good to have a break at some point to align your thoughts coming out of the right job at the right time, I guess. But any parting thoughts for people listening in?
I think the people that you meet throughout your career are super important, because these are the people that you could potentially start a new venture with. It's difficult to even picture starting something with someone you haven't worked with before, because I think that's really where you get to know people. So I think nurturing those connections that you have with people you've worked with is really important. I think, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it just depends on what kind of personality you have. If you're someone that can just can't pass up an opportunity, then it's like, okay, find other people that are like that as well, and then something will happen eventually.
Yeah.
And then I would also say, like, starting early. Like, I, even before Kenorland, I had started a company with a couple other friends, and we had staked some claims. I was out at Roundup in the prospector's tent with some rocks, and trying to sell this property to people. So it's kind of like the earlier you start something, the better off you'll be, because you try to do something, you fail, you learn from it, and that's just going to help you on the next run.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, that resonates. I mean, you gotta just keep at it. And you probably had a juice stand when you were 6 years old, selling stuff on the street, because that's the sort of, it comes with the nature of the person is important. I agree, and as I've discussed with others as well, it's a people business at the end of the day. The project, of course, you need a good project, but you can make an average project work with some really good people, but not the other way around. You can completely stuff up a good project with the wrong people. So really good,
sure.
good comment. That's all about those relationships. And I'm not sure if you sort of do a lot of networking or have done so, and what the various groups are to be a member of, but that certainly helped me on this side. Just connecting with people, and I mean, LinkedIn is a bit of a silly example, but even that is so open these days for people to. I mean, isn't that how we connect? I can't remember now. Just sending somebody a message saying, "Hey, do you have some time to chat about something?" So yeah, no,
yeah, I think it's really important to do that. Just even in the same city, hitting somebody up. Do you want to go for a coffee and picking their brain? LinkedIn as well. I've done it so much, and there was a time in 2013 or something, I was looking for jobs, and I was just hitting people up on LinkedIn. And any way that you can reach people, I think, is an important avenue to take, and just establish those contacts, because just the conversations that you have with people that are in different positions, that it can just add to your knowledge and, let's say, your worldview or your horizons. So it's important to go out and seek those kind of horizon expanding conversations.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, man. Well, next time in Munich, on that note, I'll look you up for a beer. My treat. Not that not get there very often, but I will be in Europe in February, so it's the wrong time of year. I do that every year, but maybe. Are you going to PDAC as well, or?
Yeah,
I'll be guaranteed. Sure. Well, you might run into some of our guys, but really appreciate your time and your thoughts, and all the best with the ventures. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, René, and great to have me on too.
Good stuff, man. All right, see you later.